Oh, welcome in once again to the most accurate podcast here at 4for4 Fantasy Football. I am Matt Okada, as always. However, I am not joined by John Paulson, as always. In fact, I can't even use the word as always because John Paulson is on here, so that defeats the whole purpose. Instead, I have with me Addison Hayes because John is out and about. Addison, how are you doing? Welcome in. Hope you're excited to be here.
I'm super excited to be here. It's been a couple of weeks. I filled in. I think it was at week 2 that I filled in for
Mhm.
John as well. He went to the Packer game that
Yep.
week. So now he's up doing something at a vacation rental house or something that he's
Yeah.
got. So he's just living the life over there, man, in California. So we peasants have to fill in the scraps for him as
Uh,
where we can. But I'm
let's
super excited to be here.
the craziest part about this is that week 2 was as long ago as it was. I don't know how that happened. It's absurd.
Yeah, I don't. The time just flies so quickly, and we're already. I said to him because we recorded our sneaky starts video that we do every week yesterday, and I was like, we are essentially halfway through the regular season, the fantasy regular season, and I don't know how that's possible already.
No, it's gross. I hate it. It feels like we're running out of fantasy time faster than we're gaining fantasy time. Uh we got a game to talk about. Normally we try to breeze through this TNF game somewhat quickly because it's over and the actionable stuff is gone for our listeners. However, there's a lot of actionable stuff out of this game because what on earth? The Cincinnati Bengals defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers 33-31, which should already give you a hint of how weird this game was, considering what we have expected from these offenses coming in. But Joe Flacco and Aaron Rodgers said, screw your expectations. We may be 40 years old, but we're still great. Flacco threw for 342 yards and 3 touchdowns. He targeted Jamar Chase 23 times, and Chase caught the ball 16 times for 161 yards and a touchdown. T. Higgins was also great, and perhaps most shocking was that Chase Brown, in fact, the entire Cincinnati Bengals run game seemed to work, but Chase Brown rushed for 108 yards on 11 carries, 9.8 yards per carry after being the least efficient running offense in the entire NFL coming in. The broadcast was shocked by how well they were running the ball. That's how crazy it was. So before we even get to the Steelers, let's just put them aside for now. How much are you buying into what we saw last night? Is this Flacco needed 1 week to get used to this offense, and now they're going to be running the league, and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are both going to be elite, and Chase Brown somehow having a 40-year-old who can sling the rock at quarterback makes him super efficient? Or is this like some kind of weird Thursday Night Football blip?
No, I think this could be pretty prescriptive. I actually tweeted out this was I think maybe before the Joe Flacco trade, a week or two ago that Cincy in our 4for4 like rest of season schedule tool had the easiest rest of season schedule for quarterbacks. The running backs they are second easiest, and wide receivers they are second easiest for
Wow.
uh, for the remainder of the year. So that was maybe like a week ago that I tweeted that out. And I basically said like, oh, we were robbed of greatness because of the Joe Burrow injury, and now we have to deal with this whole Jake Browning stuff. And then Joe Flacco came in, and now it seems like he's kind of the savior for this offense. And with that schedule, it was part of the reason I did mention Chase Brown as a buy candidate on the other 4for4 fantasy football channel for the rest of the year, because I was just like, hey, like the schedule's great. He's coming from one of the most difficult schedules against running backs to now one of the easiest schedules against running backs. And maybe if Joe Flacco makes the offense better, then that could be good for Chase Brown. And maybe not saying that he's going to be a top 10 running back rest of season, like the upside that we thought he was going to have coming into the year, but he could be a very serviceable, like RB 20, 21, 22 rest of season kind of guy. I mean, it seems like that's what we got last night. And that's where I think the performances that we saw last night are, I think, more prescriptive moving forward because of what Joe Flacco can do for this offense in terms of the veteran leadership and the timing and the understanding of the playbook and defenses, and elevating the ceiling and the floors for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins while also simultaneously making the offense better, which is good for Chase Brown. And then, like I said, pair that with the defensive matchups that they have for the remainder of the year, one of the easiest or the easiest, depending on the position. Yeah, I think we could see a lot more of this from Cincinnati moving forward.
Yeah. Also, particularly notable, the Steelers had been pretty much average in terms of running back, like adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back, middle of the league, which you figure has something to do with their defensive front. And the Bengals' offensive line had been so bad, obviously the worst blocking for their running backs. Just watching that game, there were huge holes over and over and over again that Chase Brown was able to sprint through and break off big plays. So maybe the offensive line even has gelled a little bit to a point where they're functional. Well, we might need to see 1 or 2 weeks to know for sure, or to know how high the ceiling is. But something, maybe multiple somethings, seems to have been fixed. So good for anyone who bought low on any of these pieces.
I did see somebody mention that Mike Gesicki, I believe, was out last night. He was inactive, and so they obviously had to play a lot more Noah Fant, who is a better Mike Gesicki is like a nothing in the blocking aspect of the tight end game. So I do want people wondered if maybe because Noah Fant was out there a lot more and he's much better of a blocker, maybe that was an extra lineman that they were getting out there more often than not by playing Fant than Gesicki.
Interesting.
So
we'll see. All right, on the Steelers side of the ball, not quite as crazy, but Aaron Rodgers did throw 4 touchdown passes. They all went to tight ends. Anybody excited about starting DK Metcalf was incredibly disappointed by this game because despite Rodgers doing quite well, DK Metcalf had just 50 yards, no touchdown on 3 catches. Pat Freiermuth was the breakout star. He had 111 yards and 2 touchdowns on 5 catches, including a 68-yard touchdown. And then Jaylen Warren was also very good, 16 for 127 on the ground, also 4 for 31 through the air. I think there's a couple questions here. 1, can we ever trust DK Metcalf? 2, can we ever trust Pat Freiermuth on the flip side of that sort of question? Or is it just going to be a tight end pick of the week? You're never going to know which one it is. There's 3 or 4 of them. It's Arthur Smith, and it's just going to be a whatever situation. And then how high do you think Jaylen Warren looks rest of season in terms of running back rankings?
I think the easiest question to answer is the tight end one. I don't think I would trust any of the tight ends still. I think this was just kind of the matchup. I think we did know coming, like Cincy historically over the last year or two has been very good matchup for tight ends.
Yes.
To where, it makes sense that when you play a team that has 3 legitimate ones, that you could have made a reasonable case to start any of them, and it worked out, especially if you started Freiermuth. It worked out well if you started Jonnu. Washington got the touchdown, so you at least got that. And as for DK Metcalf, I do think that he can be trusted moving forward. The uses last night was so weird. This is coming from somebody I am myself a Steelers fan, and then the fantasy analyst in me as well. I'm just like, you started out the drive, he immediately had like 40 receiving yards in the first 2 drives, and then was stymied for the remainder of the game. And I don't know if it was the interception that Rodgers threw very early in the game that was targeted toward DK Metcalf, and maybe the defense just said, hey, if we just remove him from Rodgers's view, then that means that they're going to have to beat us with the tight ends, which maybe that's what kind of forced Rodgers' hand to throw more towards all 3 tight ends, and then Jaylen Warren a little bit out of the backfield. Roman Wilson here and there as well. And I wonder if maybe it was just a defensive game plan for Cincy to just say, hey, we're just going to try to remove DK Metcalf and double him a little bit more. I'm wondering if that is kind of what is the case. But as far as his rest of season schedule for wide receivers, he's 3rd easiest. So since he's 2nd easiest, Pittsburgh is 3rd easiest for the remainder of the year, which included the Cincinnati matchup. And they do get Cincinnati again in a few weeks here. And he's already passed his bye, so it's also nice for him. And then you mentioned Jaylen Warren. I do think that he's a solid like flex / RB2. He can have really good weeks like this. I still think that he's very easily the lead back in that backfield. I think that the usage that we saw from Caleb Johnson last week was a little bit more because it was Warren's first week back from injury. So I think that moving forward, they trust Jaylen Warren a lot. And he also has the 3rd easiest schedule rest of season for running backs. So a lot of green in that second half, basically from like week 11 on. very, very green matchups, including, again, another matchup against the Bengals here in a few weeks.
Yeah, I also think it's funny that both these teams are so high on the easy matchups because they play, or not entirely because, but they both play in the AFC North and they both have 2 games against the Ravens defense left. So that
Yes.
matters. That Ravens defense is something. Okay. We have a lot of news to get into, and we have a Q&A at the end of the show. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. The more like high level, long reaching, rest of season-y trade type questions, the better. If you've got start sit questions, I recommend going to 4for4.com, looking at the rankings, and picking the highest people at the positions you're thinking about, because that's the easiest way to answer those questions. But we will get to those, and we will get to some news. Before we get to some news, special little mini segment here. John, as we all know, just loves speculating with no data. It's not true. He hates doing that. But John is away. So us Dynasty Nerd speculating okay guys get to play a little bit. The trade deadline is coming up in the NFL, and tons of rumors are starting to float around. So I just want to throw out some names that have been in the conversation. Some of them have been in the conversation and gotten this guy's not getting traded responses, but their names are in conversations and whoever knows with this stuff. And just blanket projection or expectation. If you have any idea of where you think they might go, and regardless, if they get traded, is it more likely to be good for their value, bad for their value in fantasy, or just relatively neutral? At the running back position, the name that is being most commonly toted around is Breece Hall. Obviously, the Jets are in a free fall with no functional offense. They theoretically have Braylon Allen, although obviously he's hurt right now. If Breece Hall gets moved, he will be going to a better offense. You basically have to guarantee. How much would he change if he goes somewhere else? And do you have any target spots?
Yeah, he's been a very obvious trade candidate for a couple weeks now for more hardcore teams that maybe need that extra running back spot. I know a lot of people mentioned maybe the LA Chargers just for kind of until Amari and Hampton can get back, and then also whenever Hampton is back, they can kind of go back to the Najee split that they had. But because Breece is, I believe he's on the final year of his rookie contract, so that's another incentive for why New York might want to trade him. And then if a team wants to buy him, depending on the price that they buy him for, they could also then give him an extension for their second contract for more of the long term. So that's where I think the LA Chargers, I saw that get floated out, and I think it makes sense if the cost to acquire him is relatively cheap, and New York is just like, we know that we're not going to sign him back again next year, and we just want something like a 5th rounder. And then that makes sense for the Chargers for the remainder of the year as well, possibly into the playoffs. But I think the Chicago Bears, honestly, are the one team that I'm most intrigued by for either Breece or for the next running back that we're going to talk about too. That they could be a situation. I don't know. I'll save it.
Okay.
But I think Chicago. I think Chicago could be a team that would be super interesting from an NFL perspective, but then also a fantasy football perspective. We know that Ben Johnson has a weird relationship with DeAndre Swift. We know that I think the Bears have had issues with the running game up until this last week against Washington when DeAndre Swift dominated. But they've had previous issues as well. And DeAndre Swift has never been like a true running back. He's a fantastic athlete, but he's not, like a running back, so to speak, outside of just doing phenomenal things with the ball in his hands. So I think that's one location that I'm really trying to see if I can, if a running back is going to get keyed in on. If Breece Hall goes there, I would be heavily interested, even though I think the split could be a little rough initially. That's something where his value might take a hit initially, because right now he's getting everything in a horrible offense that sometimes is good, to them maybe being 50-50 in a better offense that sometimes is also really great. So I just don't know where that would be, but it would long term, especially, I think it would be great for Breece Hall.
Incidentally, Breece Hall, to your point, getting all the work, getting all the yards, has not scored a single touchdown this year. I'm pretty sure his scrimmage touches without a touchdown is going to be encroaching on record-setting levels here. So if he goes to any other offense, he'll probably have a better chance of scoring at some point. The other name is Alvin Kamara. Now, there's been some rumblings that Kamara has said he would not want to be traded. I don't know that he gets to make that choice. He doesn't have a no trade clause in his contract. But if he were to go somewhere, obviously with Kendre Miller behind him in New Orleans, do you have any interest in Kamara where he goes? But then also, what does Kendre Miller become if Kamara is gone? And there has been some rumblings that Miller would be the one to go. I don't know why the Saints would do that. But either way, if one of these guys ends up alone or more alone, does that interest you at all?
If either one of them were to be alone in the Saints backfield, I would be interested for sure because they seem to really vulture each other, at least on the ground. Kendre doesn't really do much through the receiving game. That's still Kamara's kind of bread and butter right now. Kendre Miller does still have 1 year left on his rookie deal. That's what I was looking up. I was trying to remember if he was a 2022 or 2023. So he has 1 year left for his rookie deal. That could be either an incentive for New Orleans to keep him and then trade away Alvin Kamara to also get off of his contract, or that could be an incentive for another team to buy Kendre Miller for the remainder of the year. Then you also get him next year on the cheap deal. But if either one of them were to get moved, I think that would be a good thing for the running back that stays in New Orleans. But if it's Kamara, I think the most ideal outcome for fantasy football is Kamara getting traded because he can go somewhere where probably a better offense. Maybe we see a little bit more of receiving game usage than we have this year. We've seen some really weird fluctuating weeks of his target share under Spencer Rattler this year than we have in previous years with Derek Carr and then, of course, with Drew Brees. So I'm wondering if maybe the floor gets elevated a little bit more for Kamara, and then maybe the ceiling is there if we get him, better touchdown opportunities by playing in a better offense. But then that also helps Kendre Miller to be more of the guy in the backfield right now, where he can get 14, 15 plus touches and opportunities every single week to be a fantasy relevant more of a fantasy relevant running back than he is right now. There's just like hey, in an absolute desperation move, I could start him because of all the injuries and bye weeks that we have right now. He could be a legitimate, I could start this dude more often than not, especially in really good matchups, while also getting the fantasy bump from Kamara. So that's where I said the Bears, I think, would be an interesting location for Breece Hall, but I also said it for Kamara too. But I think there's a couple other spots that a Kamara type running back could be beneficial too. I know some people threw out Kansas City. I'm kind of a little higher on Isaiah Pacheco returning to form, but I think Kansas City makes sense. I think that Indianapolis, if they wanted to try to do something, maybe it's not with Kamara, but if they wanted to try to do something with a change of pace back to keep Jonathan Taylor healthy, I could see that as a run through into the playoffs from an NFL standpoint. Or I could also see I had a team in my head and then I just completely lost it. I'll try to remember maybe when we're talking about some other teams and we're talking about that.
It'll come back. All right. The Chiefs are definitely an interesting one. And the Pacheco curiosity is also interesting. You think he might end up being good over the course of the season? Ooh.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
I like that. Good to know. All right. We will see. The deadline's still a couple of weeks away, but when it comes, there will be a whole bunch of news. Well, we hope there will be a whole bunch of news, but the NFL trade deadline sometimes doesn't exactly please us as much as other sports deadlines would. At other positions, wide receiver, I'll just rattle off some names here. You tell me if any of them seem interesting to you or create interest for you, where they go or with what they leave. The Saints with both Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, one or both could potentially be on the move. Obviously, the Saints are very much in the conversation for sell a bunch of stuff because they're not doing anything right now. Jacoby Myers is one that feels very likely to get traded because he is wanted to be traded. They have a bunch of players there that are kind of all the same thing, and some young wide receivers that aren't getting snaps because of Jacoby Myers. And then A.J. Brown is one that's worth noting because of obviously everything that's going on in Philly. That one feels less likely. This is a team that's trying to contend for the Super Bowl. I don't know they're going to trade away their quote-unquote best wide receiver. But those are some names. Any standout thoughts?
I would love to see Buffalo try to make a play for one of these guys.
Yes.
I think specifically it would be Chris Olave, because he has the youth and the kind of perimeter usage and role that it seems like Josh Allen desperately needs, and it seems like Buffalo tried to address with Mari Cooper last year, and then wanted Keon Coleman to become that, but then he hasn't grown into that role, and so
Yeah.
I think Chris Olave to Buffalo, I think, is kind of my dream trade deadline landing spot, both from a rest of season fantasy football value standpoint and production, but then also from my dynasty background as well. I would love to see Chris Olave there. Jacoby Myers could be interesting depending on the situation. I think Myers getting traded would actually be worse for his situation because I think he's benefiting from being the wide receiver one, more of the wide receiver one on his team. Whereas depending on where he goes, he could be the 2 or 3, kind of more of a role player rather than an actual um, game plan for type of target share and usage. So I'm a little worried about Myers depending on where he goes. I don't think AJ Brown actually gets traded. I think the big name would be Garrett Wilson. I wouldn't be surprised if Garrett Wilson gets moved.
Ooh.
It wouldn't be to Buffalo, I don't think. I don't think they would do the divisional trade, but it's in some situation like that where it's again, I'm trying to think of a team. By the way, it was Washington that I was thinking of for Kamara as a playoff
Yeah,
move.
yeah.
That if they Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt doesn't really do much in the receiving game. If they wanted to upgrade
Nope.
McNichols, they could do that with Alvin Kamara.
Yep. Good
So
call.
Garrett Wilson, I think, is the biggest name that could possibly be moved. I don't think he actually does, but I could see it more than an AJ Brown type of wide receiver. But I'm most intrigued by
Yeah.
Olave.
I do think AJ Brown's unlikely. It is unfortunate that Garrett Wilson's in the AFC East because the two places I would most like to see him go are the Bills and the Patriots. And that's just
Yes.
very, very unlikely to happen. I would
Green
love to.
Bay?
I'm a Patriots fan. If they could
Mhm.
go get AJ Brown, oh my gosh, that would be incredible. But I also don't think that happens. So, but
Could we get Green Bay
interesting
one of
one, two
these elite
guys.
wide receivers? That'd be great too.
You would think so, but they seem to like not care about that. I don't know. It yeah, but in fairness, their offense has not been very good, and I feel like it's lost them a number of games that their defense has done everything possible to win. So they probably should go get one of these guys. Um, Very briefly, a couple tight end names that have been floated around. Mark Andrews, obviously with Isaiah Likely behind him and not doing all that much in Baltimore except for that 1 week. And then David Njoku with Harold Fannin Jr. being drafted in Cleveland, who looks great. If either of these veterans go somewhere, do you see any boost or any change?
Not to them, but more to the tight ends that are behind them, Likely and
Okay.
Fannin that you mentioned. I think would be way more interesting than either one of these
Yeah.
two guys on a new team, in my opinion.
All right. Okie dokie. We will have to be quick on this news because there's a lot of it and we like to talk and we're a ways in. So we'll go like rapid fire reactions to these things unless they require a ton of analysis. This first question might require a bit of analysis because it's one of the most talked about things in fantasy right now. Rashee Rice is back from his suspension. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN has said he will have a heavy workload right out of the gate. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks about how this offense will shake out. When he was there at the beginning of last year and Xavier Worthy was a fresh baby rookie, he was not involved at all. Now Xavier Worthy has become a big part of the offense. How much does that change with Rice back? So the big questions here really are basically just what is Rice rest of season now that he's back, and what is Xavier Worthy to you rest of season? And does everybody else who's had kind of these little flashes like Marquise Brown, um, Tyquan Thornton, do they disappear completely?
I think yes, this is really bad news for all the peripherals. Juju, I think Thornton kind of has a role. So they're gonna throw him out there if they need kind of like that speedster type thing. So I think not that Thornton was ever it was really that much of an interesting guy with Worthy healthy. He was fun whenever Worthy was injured, but
Yeah.
since Worthy's been back, he hasn't really done all that much. So I think this especially hurts Juju if anybody cared about Juju. Um, and I think this also really hurts Hollywood because Hollywood was the primary other wide receiver out there. So if Rice gets that kind of workload and, Hollywood's had 4 targets, 8, 5, 6, 5. Those are his last 5 games of targets. That I think that you just translate right into Rashee Rice, and then you start pulling other targets from Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy for Rashee Rice. I have him personally, I think, as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver rest of season. I think he's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah.
It was I have him in no less than about 3 or 4 dynasty teams, and no, probably more like 2 or 3. But it was the greatest thing ever was putting him back into my wide receiver spot
Yeah.
because I'm so ready
Yeah.
for it.
I would say that people should try to go and trade for him, but it's not going to happen because all the managers that have him have that same feeling that Addison has. They want to get him in their lineup, and they're not going to
Yep.
sell him instead. All right. In Tennessee, we can be. This one's much easier to be quick on because who cares with this offense? But Brian Callahan, the head coach of the Titans, was fired after barely more than a year. Uh, they're just awful. Is there
Mhm.
any chance this creates a little spark of interest for you in anyone, or does this make no difference across the board for the pieces that we've kind of been fringe considering?
It really doesn't make a difference for me because I think a lot of it still stems on Cam Ward,
Yeah.
which I think Cam Ward's been better than people want to give him credit for. But now Calvin Ridley's injured. Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears have been splitting the backfield a lot, so that's really kind of killed Pollard to where it's hard to play him. Then you can't play Tyjae Spears. Do we trust Ellick without Calvin Ridley right now? Maybe it's Chigakonkwo kind of sneaks up, kind of like what he did at the end of last year. I think at the end of the day, I just don't really care.
Yeah, it is a rare feat to have an offense that has not a single fantasy starter. So or someone even you really want to consider starting. But this team is just doo-doo. Yeah, no expected change. Sometimes these midseason coaching changes will change culture and stuff, so we'll keep an eye on the situation, see if Cam Ward suddenly feels like playing good football, but it's very unlikely. It's a hope in the dark. In Washington, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt has fumbled each of the last 2 weeks. I believe lost both of those fumbles. However, he has continued to ramp up as the true RB1 in Washington. It seems now that he has taken that job. And they've expressed confidence in him and basically said, we're going to, keep helping him push through this issue. Assuming he does, or assuming he keeps the job as he has it now, he is the RB what rest of season for you?
20-ish, I'd probably peg him at.
Okay.
I think he's a talented running back, but I think he's just more of a guy benefiting from just being in the backfield by himself, essentially. Like I know a lot of people want to have asked me questions about what do I do with JCM from a dynasty perspective because he's just like day 3 running back.
Yep.
And those historically, you either get like 3, 4, 5 quality seasons or you get like nothing. Like Damian Pierce
Yep.
got annihilated. Tyler Algier got annihilated. And so unless you're like Aaron Jones or Austin Eckler, you really don't get more than a couple of years. So that's what I'm scared about with Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, especially because I just don't think that he's their long term answer. And we have a really good running back class coming up here soon. So I'm wondering if Washington um, attacks that position more this year than they did last year. Anyway, that's from a dynasty standpoint. So, but I think RB20 remainder of the year because he's getting 15 plus touches every the past 2 weeks at least. He's not much in the receiving game, so that's kind of killing his PPR fantasy value, but because of just having pure opportunity and playing on a good team, you know, I think that just a solid RB2, I think is essentially where he is.
It does feel like he kind of needs to find the end zone to be really good because he doesn't have that receiving upside, which makes him a little bit less reliable. But the yards are there, the efficiency is certainly there. So if he can keep a high workload, the production should be good. All right, Garrett Wilson, we hit on him briefly as a potential trade candidate. He is currently injured with a knee and is going to most likely miss a couple weeks, very likely this one. Does anyone step up for fantasy in that receiving core for you, or is this just a big avoid while Garrett Wilson is out?
Josh Reynolds is probably also not going to play, so it's even worse now. Because Josh
Yeesh.
Reynolds could have been the one like interesting dude that we've seen production from in the past, and I think Alan Lazard missed last week. So I don't know what his injury status is right now. I haven't been up to date on my Jets injury report news because I just don't care as much. But I think Mason Taylor would be a big beneficiary, and I would hope that Brees Hall would get more targets out of the backfield. Those are essentially that's it. I'm not really like Arian Smith or like I mentioned Alan Lazard. I don't care because it's Justin Fields at the end of the day, and I just don't
Yeah.
think Justin Fields is a good quarterback.
Mason Taylor could not have had a more polarizing last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago against Dallas, he had 12 targets and caught 9 passes. So we were all super excited that the breakout was here. And then last week, he had 1 catch on 1 target while Justin Fields threw for negative yards if you count sack yardage. I agree that he's maybe the guy to look to. Do you think he is startable this week if teams have him after picking him up that 2 weeks ago?
I do. He was
Okay.
my sneaky start this week with Paulson, where we pick a player at
Nice.
each position. My tight end this week was Mason Taylor for my sneaky start, and I think I'm thinking with the Garrett Wilson being inactive, just the lack of players to throw to. I'm kind of wondering if maybe those London games are weird. So I'm wondering if there was some London-ness to the lack of receiving work and just the Jets being godly awful, more
Yeah.
awful than usual in their bad games. But I'm thinking that Mason Taylor's going to be pretty good and should be startable, I think, this week.
Love it. In LA, Puka Nakua is out to the chagrin of all fantasy lovers because he's been incredible. But that ankle injury that he suffered has him out for this week, maybe another 1 or 2. Does someone step up there? There theoretically is a little more talent there, and there's a better quarterback, passing wise, at least there. He's kind of not been on the same page as Devontae Adams, it seems. So does this force Stafford and Adams onto the same page, or does somebody else step up and become fantasy viable for LA?
Yeah, I think Adams should see a little bit of a bump. The targets really haven't been the issue, like you mentioned. They just really haven't connected. And I do wonder if that's just kind of a new quarterback, new wide receiver thing.
Yeah.
But you would think that Devontae Adams could be a little bit better. I'm more interested in Tutu Atwell, who had a limited practice on Wednesday, then a full practice yesterday. So I'd imagine he would be another full practice today. Last year, I believe it was 6 games without Puka Nakua in 2024, Tutu averaged 11 PPR points per game in those 6 games. And, he had, I think half those games was 8+ targets, had stat lines of like 6 for 80 and 7 for 50 and stuff like that. That I think Tutu would be more of the guy than a Jordan Whittington or I can't even remember who else they have behind him that could have been of interest. Tyler Higbee,
Yeah, but
maybe. I'm not starting Tyler Higbee, but I wouldn't be shocked if Higbee saw a little bit of an increase. I think he was the leading receiver in yards last week for LA.
can I interest you in Konata Mumpfield,
That's
7th
the
round pick?
Pittsburgh rookie wide receiver, Kanata Mumfield.
Yep.
That's right. Dynasty star.
Uh, all right. I like the Atwell call. They have thrown the ball to Adams a bunch as a wide receiver too. So even if he gets a little bit of a bump, you should expect someone else to see targets as well. In Tennessee, we briefly touched on this offense. Calvin Ridley is not practicing with a hamstring injury. We briefly touched on, or you mentioned the name Alec Iomanner. Are you interested in starting him if Ridley is out, just based on the targets he might get?
I think I'm actually starting him in one league. Let me see if I
Okay.
can pull it up to see if I actually am, because I am. This is a league where it's a 12-team league where we can start, I believe, up to 5 wide receivers.
Wow.
Um, One of them's a wide receiver tight end flex spot, and so I'm like back and forth on who I should start there. I have Khalil Shakir out. I don't want to start Jerry Judy. Josh Downs also looks like he's not playing, so I do have currently Alec Iomanner in my flex spot in this league.
Big.
But if Kittle plays, I think I'm probably playing Kittle over Iomanner.
Okay,
That's
true.
kind of what I'm waiting to make sure that he plays. But I do think Alec is startable. I think this is a terrible week with wide receiver injuries. I mean, we mentioned Garrett Wilson, Puka, Calvin Ridley, Zay Flowers is on bye. Khalil Shakir, as I just mentioned, is on bye. I don't love Jerry Judy, especially because it sounds like we're going to have like 30-mile-an-hour winds in Cleveland this week. On top of the fact that I don't think I just want to play. I don't really like Jerry Judy in general with Dylan Gabriel. So I don't really love some other peripheral options that you could be looking at. Even like Josh Downs, I don't think is going to play. So if you were looking at any of these guys, it's really tough to, with wide receivers to just not say that Alec isn't playable essentially. So I do think in some certain instances, like my team right now, I think that Alec is playable this week as with a floor play, not a ceiling play. Floor
Yeah.
play.
The air yards have been there for Alec Manor. It just the ball has not landed in his hands very often. So maybe you give him a few extra chances, he will get there. Incidentally, 274 incomplete air yards this season, which is like top 15, and most people above him have a bunch more targets. 167 completed air yards, if you're wondering how bad it is. The Buccaneers situation is disastrous.
More wide receivers out.
Yeah, Emeka Buka not practicing with a hamstring injury. Mike Evans, very TBD. Chris Godwin is out. Plus Jalen McMillan from before the season. Do you like any? There are a bunch of names floating around. Some of them contributed last week when these guys started to fall out. Do you like anybody actually enough to start them this week? And if you do, I assume that means you still have confidence in Baker. But if you don't, does that mean that Baker Mayfield will suffer missing his top 3 to 4 options?
I had Baker Mayfield as my quarterback sneaky start, more so just to instill confidence in people to still be willing to play him this week in a great matchup against Detroit. So I do like Baker Mayfield, regardless of who and who does not play this week. Which, as you mentioned, it sounds like Ibuka and Godwin are definitely going to be out. Mike Evans, more of a game time decision. I would play Mike Evans if we find out Sunday morning that he is going to play. Or if you wanted to roll the dice, you could throw Mike Evans into your starting lineup if you had one of the backup options behind him that you could pivot to quickly if we find out that he's actually not going to play on Monday. I do like Sterling Shepard. I think he's a floor play if you need it. Tez Johnson, I think, is the upside play as a potential MVP candidate this year. And that's a joke for anybody if they didn't see the Tez Johnson after post game interview that he had with him. But I do think Tez Johnson can be productive and has the big playability for Baker. Then there's Cameron Johnson, Cameron with a K. I have no idea who this dude is. But he was the leading receiver for them last week. I feel like we've thrown him out mostly. But the fantasy community in general has just kind of been like, yeah, that's not him. That was a weird game. But I don't know. Maybe there is something there. I personally, I would be looking at Shepard and Tez. So maybe I am also guilty of throwing out Cameron Johnson, but if you really, really needed somebody, I don't think he's unplayable either.
It is usually the case that the fantasy streets will throw out a guy who the dynasty experts don't know who it is. Like this guy, his college stats don't even show up on his. He shares my birthday, so that's something. With the same birthday.
There you go.
He went to Barton.
Yeah,
and
where
that's
that
all
is,
I
have no idea either.
Nope. So this is one of the most out of nowhere guys we have ever seen. Maybe. Yeah, I agree with you on the receiver core or the wide receiver core. I also like maybe Kate Otten a little bit this week. When the top wide receivers tend to fall out like this, sometimes it's the running backs and tight ends that pick up more than the fifth string receivers that are there for a reason. So I think Otten could be interesting. Rashad White also with Bucky Irving still out. Could see a bump.
Yep. I was about to say, I think Rashad White has a little bit more confidence this week because of the increased target share. PPR.
Yep. We talked about Jacoby Myers with the trade situation, but he is not practicing still with an injury. If he's out, Trey Tucker and or Michael Mayer with Brock Bowers also still not practicing and most likely out through next week, which is the Raiders' bye in week 8. So not seeing Bowers till week 9, most likely. If it's no Bowers and no Myers, are Tucker and or Michael Mayer interesting to you this week?
Yes, they both are. Trey Tucker would be, if you're like, as we're going down the list, and you're looking at your waiver wire and you're like, okay, I could pick any of these guys up off the waivers and play any of them, Trey Tucker would be at the top of my list for the wide receiver position. He's been very solid, even with Jacoby Myers on the field. So without Myers, I would expect a little bit of a bump. I said this to Paulson yesterday. I'm like, he might be 2025 Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings last year had that week 3 like 40 bomb with like 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now Trey Tucker had the week 3 40 bomb with like 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kind of has been a little sneaky relevant because he's been necessary for the team based on injuries and lack of other receivers on the team. So I'm thinking, we might see really good relevance for the remainder of the year for Trey Tucker as a kind of very flexible option, especially if Jacoby Myers then does get traded. I think Trey Tucker is a very good ad right now just to see what happens for the remainder of the year. But especially if you need a guy this week, Trey Tucker would be my number one kind of more waiver wire fill in than an Alec Ioman or Sterling Shepard or Tez Johnson or anybody like that. Michael Mayer too, I think is a great start as well. We saw what he could do last week. I think I've even said, was it on this show back in week 2 when we talked about Bowers that I said that Mayer was like 90% Brock Bowers,
I
or
think
it could be.
so.
If
Yeah.
I think that was when it was, and I mean 5 for 50 and a touchdown last week. It's not too bad. So I think I would play Michael Mayer over Mason Taylor as well. I trust Geno a little bit more than Justin Fields, not significantly more, but I trust Geno a little bit more to play Mayer over Mason Taylor if you needed that tight end option.
Yeah. I mean, everybody should remember this is not some 5th round, non important tight end backup sort of guy. This is a guy, Michael Mayer, who was very highly drafted. It was shocking when they drafted Bowers because they had just drafted a tight end so highly and was a very popular dynasty, like future star potentially. So he
Yep.
can be, I would agree, a lot of what Bowers is when Bowers is healthy. So I'd be confident rolling him out there. The Vikings quarterback situation. Insert several question marks here. No, nobody knows what's going on. Both of them are banged up. JJ McCarthy obviously recovering from the ankle injury that he suffered several weeks ago. Carson Wentz is dealing with what I believe is a shoulder issue. Both have been seeing practice time, and Kevin O'Connell's basically said, I'm not ready to name a starter. I don't know if that's because he's waiting to see who's the most healthy or if they're trying to figure out if they'd rather go with Wentz over McCarthy, even if both are healthy. Obviously, McCarthy did not look good to start the year as a passer, at least. Wentz hasn't looked all that much better, but they just need functional quarterback play with how good their defense is. I suppose I'll ask you the question this way, Addison, because we just don't know right now.
Mm-hmm.
Based on who starts, does it change anything for you for Justin Jefferson and then for any of the extra pieces there?
Yes. I have been pro Carson Wentz for a couple years now, but definitely for this year, especially for the fantasy values of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, potentially TJ Hawkinson if you needed to start a tight end. But specifically for Jefferson, and then since Addison has been back, I have been much more pro Carson Wentz because he has the experience, whereas JJ McCarthy does not. And then McCarthy was also coming off that knee injury from last year that I feel like a lot of us just kind of forgot or just thought
Yeah.
that wasn't going to really matter. And now he's injured again. So I think that there is just more risk with starting any Vikings wide receiver. Obviously, you're not going to sit Justin Jefferson, but Addison becomes more of a potential sit if JJ McCarthy plays. Whereas I think he is a very confident start with Carson Wentz because Wentz is just not afraid to chuck it. And like as you mentioned, like I've cooled significantly on Carson Wentz potentially being a more redemption arc kind of quarterback. I thought maybe he could have done that for a year or two now. And he just needed an opportunity. Then he got the opportunity, looked good in the first week. And then the second week, the London game, he just did not look good. And so I think he's not a top 30 NFL quarterback, but he's good enough that he can deliver better fantasy days for Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, maybe even Mason or Xavier Scott if you are
Ooh.
that deep.
Yeah, it is difficult to provide a lot of production to your pass catchers when you're completing 13 of 20 and 11 of 21, which is what McCarthy did in his 2 starts. That is not enough passing work to support really even one guy, let alone a couple. And Wentz these past 2 weeks has completed more passes in each of those games than McCarthy threw in his 2 games. So you don't have to be great as a Carson Wentz even to just provide better production for those pass catchers based on how much more he's throwing it. And he's also been better than McCarthy was. Last couple things of news here before we run through some quick injury flags. Liam Cohen says that the Jaguars plan to put Travis Hunter, quote, in the position to be the number one a little bit more often, end quote. Now, they've said some things about Travis Hunter for the last like 3 or 4 months. Not all of them have materialized, so I don't know how much we can trust this. Do you bump your expectations for Travis Hunter at all based on this, or just based on the reality that he is a young receiver who's still working his way into the offense in the league, and maybe he'll be better down the stretch?
Um, the what is it? The latter? Is that the second of the two? I always get former
Yes.
and latter messed up. The latter of what you just said, the one where I think that he is still a rookie wide receiver and a kind of a unicorn rookie wide receiver, considering that they're trying to play him on both sides. So he's learning the offense and he's learning the defense, playing snaps on both sides in actual NFL games. So I think there's even more of a learning curve from him. But I would my position on Travis Hunter all summer and draft season from a dynasty standpoint has just been he is a better wide receiver than he is defensive back. Not to say that he can't play DB, but I think he's a better wide receiver individually to his talent. And I think he would be more impactful to the Jaguars team as a whole as a wide receiver than a defensive back. So they should be focusing more on his offensive capabilities than defensive capabilities. And we've seen it. We've seen the, small glimpses of Travis Hunter being phenomenal, like that 40-yard catch he had a week or two ago, which was kind of like an acrobatic body control catch. Like that's what Travis Hunter can do. So they should absolutely be finding ways to give him the ball more and making him more of like the first read on plays and being more of a consistent target option all across the field, but specifically down the field as well. He could be Brian Thomas Jr. on the opposite side or better than Brian Thomas Jr. I think that's still within his range of outcomes career wise, not 2025, but career wise. I think he could be a better wide receiver than Brian Thomas Jr. I haven't given up on that. And we can't give up on him just yet because he's only played 6 games as a rookie. And we've, oftentimes see rookie wide receivers just take time to actually get integrated and develop
Yep.
um, develop rapport with their quarterback. So you can't give up on him just yet. I'm not confident really in like starting him right now. I need to see it before I actually feel good about playing him. But the moment I see it for one consistent game, he plays like 75-80% of snaps, has 7 or 8 targets, 5 receptions, 80 yards. Like once I see that one game log, I'm in.
Uh, Fair to say he is not droppable in redraft because of what you've just laid out, but he's probably not startable either. Pull him on
100%.
your
Yeah,
bench.
he's a very,
Okay,
very good stash.
good. Love it. All right. In Carolina, this is another one that's very interesting and curious. Chuba Hubbard has returned to practice in a limited fashion. This is as of yesterday. I haven't seen today's practice report, today being Friday. It will probably be important, and you'll want to keep an eye on his status going into Sunday. But let's assume he's healthy, or if not, we'll push this question to next week technically. But when he gets back, what do you expect in Carolina? This feels like one of the biggest questions in fantasy right now because Rico Dowdle has been unironically the best running back in the NFL the last couple of weeks. Heck, if you just look at his numbers across the season, he's one of the best running backs in the NFL just because of these last couple of weeks. But
Mhm.
Hubbard won this job over him early in the year or in the offseason in camp. When he's back, what's your expected breakdown for this backfield?
I think it's going to be disgusting. I think it's going to be so annoying because it's going to ruin both of them. Like, I fully believe that had Chuba Hubbard not gotten hurt, for me to sit here and say he would have had 200 yards and 180 yards in back-to-back games seems uh, like a stretch for me to say that Chuba could have done that. But there were 2 matchups against abysmal run defenses, that I think Chuba Hubbard is as good of a runner as Rico Dowdle, and maybe a more complete running back than Rico Dowdle as well. I would also I fully would understand if you believe that Rico's a better running back than Chuba as well. I think they're very comparable. So where had Chuba just not gotten hurt, I think we would have had some pretty great performances from Rico Dowdle, and we wouldn't even be having that discussion at all. But now, because of Rico's performances, I think it's going to be a very gross 50-50 split where it's essentially like the Titans backfield right now, where you really can't feel like you play either one of them. Or maybe I should say it compares more to the Seahawks backfield, where you feel like you should be
Ooh.
able to start one of them, but
Ooh.
you really can't.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. You're just like, come on, man. At least in Seattle, it's like they need to stop giving the ball to Zach Charbonnet. Whereas
Yes.
with Chuba and Rico, maybe they're both just good enough to where they both look good, and we're like, man, they both should get more touches, but they can't because they're playing on the same team, and it's going to be really annoying and really gross. I did just see, actually, there was a Bleacher Nation fantasy alert from Dave Canales that says Chuba Hubbard is good to go.
Yep.
So there is
I
that.
saw it as well.
So
8 minutes ago.
I would not be playing either one of them.
Yeesh.
I think that it just sucks. I hate it for both of them, and one of them should get traded. That should be more of the answer.
Fair. We didn't bring up either of their names, but with how Rico Dowdle performed, you figure that maybe it's a little audition. Are you trying to emergency run to your phone in all your leagues that you have Rico Dowdle, if there's any right now, and trade him for like any RB3 or wide receiver 3? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. From a dynasty standpoint, I was saying to massively sell Rico Dowdle, because there's also then the dynasty implications are like his age. He's only on a 1-year deal. So there was a lot of more signals there from a dynasty standpoint. But redraft, I think if you could turn Rico Dowdle into Isaiah Pacheco, which I think is highly possible right now, I would be doing that. Maybe you can get a Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt because he didn't have that great of a game on Monday. Maybe you might have to add something to Rico to do this, or maybe you don't. I don't know. Some people are weird and they just see you're like, whoa, you're giving up Rico Dowdle. He just had 30 points each of the past 2 weeks. I don't know. Some people are weird. Maybe you can buy into. It's tough because they played last night, but maybe it was like a Chase Brown sort of situation. If you could have bought low on Chase Brown with Rico Dowdle, you might still be able to do that too. But yes, I would be trying to see if you can get somebody else.
Okay. Big. Last deepish, confusing-ish bit of question. The 49ers situation. Oh boy, is it rough over there. Ricky Pearsall's not practicing. This is as of yesterday's report. TBD what they get today, unless you see something today since they're a Pacific team. No, that makes it less likely. Juwan Jennings is limited, or has been limited this week. Brock Purdy is practicing, but it's a TBD there. And then George Kittle can and maybe should be back this week, but we don't know for sure yet. Pending any official announcements here, what's your general take on this receiving room? Let's even say moving forward. So this week, more or less, you're going to start the guys that start. But moving forward, when everybody's back, does Kendrick Bourne become a problem for Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings? If everyone's healthy, is Pearsall not as good as he was at the start of the year when he was kind of the only guy? When Kittle's healthy, is he back to being an elite tight end one? These sorts of questions, rest of season.
Kittle's the easiest. Plug him in your lineup if he's playing, and yes, I expect him to be a top 3 fantasy tight end minimum moving forward. He should be great. I think when Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings play, that is going to put a thorn in Kendrick Bourne, and I don't think Kendrick Bourne is going to ruin either one of those two. Especially because it seems like Bourne's production is more tied to also playing with Mac Jones, because they have the Patriots connection, and they're apparently like best friends right now. Maybe they get breakfast together like Stafford and Kupp did a few years ago.
True.
I don't know, but Bourne's biggest season with the Patriots was in the Mac Jones era. So now that that's just being transferred over into a Kyle Shanahan system, it just seems to be elevated even more. So I'm wondering if Bourne fades away because I do think Pearsall and Jennings are better wide receivers than him, and they're going to be healthy. But then he also loses Mac Jones, so Purdy doesn't have that connection with him. So I think Bourne kind of fades away. If Pearsall doesn't play this week, I think that Bourne is a good start once again if Mac Jones is the starter, even with George Kittle there.
Well, I was just going to say major flag on this situation. They play on Sunday night. So you
Right.
can't be super wishy-washy with these guys unless you have the backups.
Right. It sounds like Ricky Pearsall's not going to play. Like I
Yeah,
would be,
I would
I'm
agree.
fine with playing Kendrick Bourne. I know people have asked me like, would you still play Bourne? Even if we hear that George Kittle's going to play, and I would say yes. So like Bourne's in my lineup right now.
Okay.
And that my confidence in doesn't really waver with Kittle because I think Kittle would just take the Tonga's production that we've seen from him. So it's totally fine. And Bourne's been great with that. But the other wrench in this is we haven't even talked about is Brandon Ayuk comes back at some point.
True.
So
Supposedly week
there is
10
also
maybe?
that. Yeah. So we're only a couple weeks away from Brandon Ayuk potentially coming back, which I think that is going to be more of an issue for Pearsall and Jennings than anything. Which that's why like Kittle just feels so separate from everybody else because he's gonna be phenomenal. He's the tight end, doesn't have to worry about splitting snaps with all of them. So we'll have to see what happens with Brandon Ayuk coming back, but I think that's the bigger issue.
Also, tell me if you agree with this. With all these people coming back, you likely will see less targets for Christian McCaffrey, who's seen an unhealthy amount of receiving work. But George Kittle coming back into that run game cannot be underrated. I think we talked about someone earlier. Who was it? Was it a Steelers guy? Maybe
Noah
or
Fant.
Bengals
Noah
guy?
Fant helping
Noah
with Chase
Fant.
Brown. Yeah.
Kittle is one of the best, if not the best, run blocking tight end in football. So if he gets back, you figure the efficiency for Christian McCaffrey in the run game might go up. I would think that would kind of counterbalance the lack or the downplay in receiving work. Do you agree with that?
Mostly to a degree. Like if especially if it makes the offense better and McCaffrey's able to score a little bit more. He only has 4 touchdowns, which to say he only has 4 touchdowns in 6 games is, some players would dream of having that kind of a production situation. But if it makes the offense better and he has now like multi-touchdown opportunities, that could cancel it out. And I'm not super worried about the receiving game for Christian McCaffrey in the sense that he's gonna like lose everything because like he's averaging 10 targets per game. So if that goes down to like 7.5 targets per game, that's still far and away the most magnificent usage that we could ever possibly imagine for any running back.
It's been insane. All right. Just a few more quick things in terms of injuries to monitor. Kyler Murray has been limited with a foot injury. If you're trying to get him into your lineup, you're going to have to pay attention to that. No fallout for the pass catchers there, whether it's him or Brissett for you, based off what we saw from Brissett.
No, because it also sounds like Marv isn't going to play. Or it depends on with Marv, but
concussion. He has
I'm not really like, oh darn, I can't play Michael Wilson now, And Trey McBride's going to be fine regardless of who it is. So it's more of if you had Kyler, are you playing him or not?
In Cleveland, David Njoku has a knee injury. It's a TBD on him for right now, as last I've seen at least. If he misses this week, Harold Fannin becomes what against the Dolphins defense? Tight end.
I would like to say a top 5 option, but that weather scares the crap out of me. To where, but you would think because Harold Fannin's ADOT is like 3 right now, like that he would be the one that would benefit from having to throw shorter passes because of the weather, and he also just benefits from just playing with Dylan Gabriel and an offense that doesn't really trust him to cut loose. So I still think that he has a top 5 ceiling and would be a better start than I think a handful of tight ends out there right now that you're probably debating between him and Fannin.
I like it. All right. The last bit of news takes us into the first of our key matchups, and that is that CeeDee Lamb, with his ankle injury, says he will play and is fully healthy, said he even could have played last week, but the team wanted to play it safe, let him have another week to get completely healthy. I do wonder if they thought they could beat the Panthers without him, and that didn't work out so well. So
one of the coaches had George Pickens on their fantasy team, and they said, "Give me one more week."
Yeah. Commanders versus Cowboys is my choice for game of the week. I say that's my choice for game of the week. It's the most obvious game of the week we've had all year. The over-under is 55.5, which is crazy high for an NFL football game. I guess starting on the Washington defense side of the ball, they are soft against quarterbacks and tight ends in AFPA, relatively average against running backs and wide receivers. Don't know that it really matters that much because you're basically starting every Cowboy within reason. I guess the only one that you've maybe thrown into a lineup if you're crazy is Ryan Flournoy, and now you're pulling him out with CeeDee Lamb back. But otherwise, you're starting everybody, right?
Yep. Dak, Ferguson, Javonte, Pickens, Lamb, all in.
Sweet.
Easy.
Okay. On the other side of the ball, it has become the case to basically start everyone against the Cowboys defense because they are bottom 3 in AFPA against quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. And they're average against tight ends, which just feels like it's because so many points go to those other positions. Washington's a little banged up. We're likely having no Terry McLaurin, and Deebo Samuel is hurt, but I believe is going to play. We'll have to see. Keep your eye on that. But with the Dallas defense and with no Terry McLaurin, most likely, are there interesting guys you can play in Washington? Obviously, you're playing Daniels. I think we were saying you're playing Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt. I'd be curious how high those guys get for you. But are there other interesting pass-catching plays you're willing to throw out?
I think Debo's a good start if he plays.
Yeah.
I know he had a rough week last week, but it was also like rainy and stuff. And I think just against Dallas, they're going to need him a little bit more. This kind of feels like a worse version of the Buccaneers wide receiver situation because I have less confidence in being able to pick who the guy would be outside of Deebo Samuel between Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane and Chris Moore. The real answer might just be a whole lot of Zach Ertz. That's just really might be the situation, as we kind of saw last week. So I guess if I were to like pick a wide receiver, if you just be like, I have all three of these guys, I can't play any Buccaneer, I can't play Trey Tucker or anybody else. Pick a commander. I would probably pick Chris Moore, to be honest with you, over Lane and Luke McCaffrey. McCaffrey, I think, has better touchdown upside. He's been a more of a touchdown kind of guy recently, but I think Chris Moore has more of the experience. Just NFL experience and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of like how Lamedy Zaccheaus was for them last year too, at the end of last season. So I think it might be Chris Moore. But I think the real answer is a lot of Zach Ertz. Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt, I think, is a top 15 running back play. And Jaden Daniels, I mean, it's not like you're having start-sit decisions with Jaden Daniels, but from like a DFS standpoint, he's probably top 3 that I'd be willing to play this week.
Deebo Samuel, I just was able to find it was spotted at practice today, but we don't know how involved, and he wasn't practicing earlier in the week, so it's very fringe with him. Keep an eye on that. As Addison says, if they're both out, somebody's probably going to be good. Hard to know who. Zach Ertz did catch all of his 6 targets last week for 43 yards and a touchdown. He might be a sneaky top 10 tight end this week. Maybe even not that sneaky because he's been kind of good this year. Sometimes. Mostly.
Jaden Daniels is Paulson's QB2 on the week.
Woo! So okie dokie.
And he has Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt. This is in half PPR, RB14.
Wow. All righty. Roll them out there. The fade of the week, I have as the Giants and the Broncos. Now, I mainly have this in here because of all the Giants excitement. And I hate to be the one to poo-poo it because I love Jackson Dart and Kem Scadaboo. I have a gazillion dynasty shares of both of them. Loved them both coming into this year. But this Broncos defense is monstrous. The over-under is 40.5. They've been extremely good, top 5 in AFPA against quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends. They're 20th in AFPA against running backs, but I do wonder if Scadaboo will have trouble getting touchdowns if they can't get to the red zone / goal line. So, this is something I shared last week. You weren't around for this, so I'll share it with you unless you happen to have seen it somewhere. The Broncos against rushing quarterbacks in particular have been heinous. It is gross. Coming into the Justin Fields matchup, they had allowed 15 rushing yards to quarterbacks on the entire year. And there were some good rushing quarterbacks in that group. 31 yards but for Justin Fields, which was kind of high compared to what the Broncos had allowed. But it's not that high for Fields, and obviously Fields was abysmal for fantasy. Jackson Dart has been getting a lot of his work on the ground. That makes me super concerned. So on the Giants side of the ball, Are you willing to start Dart? Are you willing to stream Dart if you have to? A lot of people obviously have picked him up. If you are, is there anyone in that passing game you're willing to play? And then does Cam Scadaboo still crack must-start territory despite a tough defense?
Dart, I think that you could maybe find better options to play other than Jackson Dart. I know I saw that you starred this question, but there's one in here of Darnold or pick up Dart, and then also have Kyler Murray as well from Zabby.
Yep.
I would be playing Darnold. So I'm looking at Paulson's rankings. He's got Dart at QB 16. Darnold is QB 18. I don't believe Kyler's in here. Jacoby Brissett is QB 24 though, but I'd imagine Kyler would be higher than that because of rushing upside too. But like CJ Stroud is right around Jackson Dart. I would rather play CJ Stroud. That I did say I would rather play Darnold, right? I did officially answer that.
Yes.
So I'd rather play Darnold. I'd probably rather play Trevor Lawrence. I'd rather play Matthew Stafford. If Mac Jones plays, I'd probably rather play Mac Jones than Jackson Dart. I mean, he just throws for 300 every single week. And if he throws a touchdown or two, especially as Atlanta, like Atlanta has a really good defense, but they have a really good offense that they're probably going to have to throw more as well. So I think there's just better options. Jackson Dart's rushing ability could get him there, maybe. But I fear that this is the game where, because they don't have Malik Neighbors, they don't have like a true outside weapon, that Surtain is just going to be able to lock down whoever's across from him, because the skill gap between him and the next wide receiver is so great that they just aren't. There's not going to have one wide receiver out at all times, essentially, with whoever Surtain locks down. And I just fear that that's just not enough for them to really move the ball. As you mentioned, they're probably good against Theo Johnson. They're probably like, I'm okay playing Wandale, maybe from just a pure target standpoint. I'm not sure how well he's going to do on those targets, but Wandale could be okay. Scadaboo, I think, could be fine from a receiving standpoint. I do wonder if, because of the lack of receiving weapons, and maybe if they're not able to move the ball on the outsides, that they more turn towards Scadaboo, around the line of scrimmage. And I did look up, like, Denver has been beaten by receiving running backs to a degree. They gave up 2 for 50 and a touchdown to Jonathan Taylor, 6 for 59 to Amari and Hampton, 3 for 58 and a touchdown to Saquon Barkley. So it's not like they're getting immensely beaten by just a ton of receptions, but on those receptions, the running backs have been very efficient. And I'm wondering if that maybe is something where Cam Scadaboo, who we've seen have, 6+ receptions in a game a couple times this year, maybe that's a situation where Scadaboo could be okay for you, even if he's not scoring, but if he has 8 fantasy points from his receiving workload, that could get you to a solid RB2 start with his rushing workload.
Love the Scadaboo confidence. I also like the Wandale Robinson call, because I feel like it's unlikely he's going to get a Patrick Surtain cover, because he's Wandale Robinson.
Probably not.
Likely working out of the slot a lot. If you're going to beat this team, or you're going to try to beat this team, you're probably going to need to throw a lot of short passes to Scadaboo and Wandale and stay away from the outside corners, and try to dink and dunk your way down the field. I agree on everyone you named above Dart, and I probably agree on several names you didn't name above Dart. I just think this is an awful matchup, not just for quarterbacks, but for Dart's style of quarterback. On the other side of the ball, the Giants' D has been pretty tough against quarterbacks and tight ends in AFPA, but pretty soft against running backs and wide receivers. You figure you're putting in Dobbins and Cortland Sutton, because they've been mostly good, though some inconsistent games, particularly for Sutton. Anybody else you feel confident in?
No, that's pretty much it. I've stayed away from the Franklin Mims kind of stuff. I know a lot of people, I feel like, have gone a little too far. Not like too far in terms of being like, oh, Troy Franklin's so good. But I feel like I've seen Troy Franklin in starting lineups, or as start sit decisions, and just on redraft teams in general, longer than he necessarily should have. Maybe still holding on to what we saw from him like the first couple of weeks of the year. Yeah. But he hasn't been more than anything than like just a couple of catches a game, really. Outside of, I think he had one random week in like week 5 or 6 or something like that. Or week 4 or 5.
There was a decent week in week 4. The really crazy one was in week 2, when he caught 8 of 9 targets for 89 yards and a touchdown, and Cortland Sutton did absolutely nothing that day. I would love to have an announcement from the coaching staff on what happened that week. Did Cortland Sutton miss a practice? Did he slap a coach? It was really weird. But outside of that, yeah, Franklin has not done much. I think you can probably move on there.
Yeah, Sutton's in for
All
sure.
right.
I think the Broncos are inducting Demaryius Thomas into their Hall of Fame
Oh,
this weekend, and I saw like Cortland Sutton. I saw he had an interview or something that he was like talking about his time with Demaryius Thomas because he had to overlap as a rookie.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if we see like one of those sentimental games, and I'm hopeful, especially after last week when Sutton didn't do anything, so we have kind of like a correction week for Cortland Sutton just in general, but then he's also playing for Demaryius Thomas as well. I'm wondering if we get some of that in there too.
The old Torrey Smith game.
Mm.
Okay. Let's get into the matchups. We will go through these somewhat quick so we can get to the questions. At the quarterback position, the good side, there isn't any this week. All of the good matchups go to the best quarterbacks, which we don't talk about here because you're starting them. I'll give you this one name because it's funny. Spencer Rattler gets the Bears, who are 29th in AFPA. He has been sneaky decent for fantasy. Some people are in tough situations this week. Maybe they picked up Jackson Dart, but they can't stream him. They're missing Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. We've got multiple other injuries. Is there a world in which Spencer Rattler should get into starting lineups this week, outside of 2 QB leagues where he most likely should?
You'd have to be playing in like a 16-team league or something, I think.
Okay.
Play Jackson Dart over Spencer Rattler, but
okay. All right.
But he has been sneaky. I do think the Saints. This shouldn't be a trap game for the Bears, but I feel like it maybe could be. To where I think the Saints potentially cover. They've been scrappy. Rattler hasn't been terrible, but I just don't know if like he's going to get enough like touchdown wise to be more than like 14, 15 fantasy points.
Yeah, he has not thrown multiple touchdown passes in a game since week 2, in which he rolled through 3. He has gotten like 20 to 40 rushing yards on a consistent basis, but this would have to be a very special game for him. That was the only name even mildly worth mentioning, though, so I had to do it. On the bad side, there are several more of these because obviously, we just talked about. Daniel Jones gets the Chargers, who are 4th in AFPA. I am curious just your general take on Daniel Jones as well, given the start of the year versus the less lucrative mostly since then. Trevor Lawrence gets the Rams, who are 9th. I don't think many people are running to start Trevor Lawrence. Sam Darnold gets the Texans, who are 1st. We just talked about him and said over Jackson Dart, but he has the toughest matchup in AFPA. That's against the Texans. And then whichever guy starts for the Niners gets the Falcons, who are 3rd in AFPA. These are all fringier guys. Are you willing to start any of them anyways, or are they all benches for you?
I'm willing to start them if you don't really have better options. Like I would start all these guys over Jackson Dart, as we kind of mentioned. I would start him over Spencer Rattler.
Yeah,
it's tough because it's like Flacco and Rodgers played last night, and they would have been like really good pivots to and that would have worked out based on their performances last night. But like we can't talk about that right now because they were the Thursday night game. So those were really the more interesting pivots this week. Unless you're going to pivot to Bryce Young or Jacoby Brissett or Michael Penix or Tua or somebody like that. But I just feel like with the way that Daniel Jones has been producing, especially the way that the Colts have been performing, I feel like you just got to throw him in there. Same thing for Sam Darnold. JSN is just absolutely incredible. So I would just play Sam Darnold if you have him and you don't really have other better options than him. Lawrence is my least confident of this group of 4 to play him. But I still think that he can get it done, especially if he's running a little bit more. And then I don't mind Mac Jones. If it was Brock Purdy, I'd probably be a little bit more questionable about it, but I don't mind Mac Jones as much. So if you have to start him, I'm fine with that too.
As a reminder, if you are looking at Trevor Lawrence or any other Jaguars or Rams, that is the London game bright and early at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. So remember that when your lineups come around. At the running back position, Jordan Mason gets the Eagles, who are 25th in AFPA, which is quite interesting against running backs. That is for Minnesota. Alvin Kamara and or Kendre Miller, ? Gets the Bears, who are 26th in AFPA. And the New England backfield, which we have managed to not talk about to this point, gets the Titans, who are 29th in AFPA and almost feel worse than that. They have been atrocious. There's not many spots that are worse than that, but you know what I mean. Mason feels like a pretty solid start. Kamara and Miller, I'm curious what you think about there. And then what are you doing with this Patriots backfield right now?
Yep, Mason's a good start. I would play Kamara as well. I'm not as interested in Kendra Miller. Like if he has like 10 carries for 40 yards, like that's 4 fantasy points. So I'm not really as concerned for Kendra Miller at this moment with Kamara still there and a lack of receiving work for Kendra. But I think Kamara is a fine start. The Patriots backfield, man, like if you've got to play Stevenson, then you got to play Stevenson. Like he's probably, he's getting goal line touches, which you would imagine that they're going to have opportunities inside the 10 this week. So that would go to Ramondre Stevenson. Maybe you could talk yourself into saying, well, if they're up 30-0 in the end of the third quarter, then Travion gets the fourth quarter. But I don't even think I want to rely on that. I'm not starting Travion Henderson until I actually see him do something. I think that's basically where I'm at with him. I'm more willing to drop Travion Henderson than I am Travis Hunter in redraft, and that's probably like a really hot take.
Ooh.
So I just I don't know if it happens this year.
Yeah,
it sucks. They just really like Ramondre.
They've been very obstinate about not letting it happen, despite many opportunities for it to happen. So I don't disagree majorly with you there. Tough though, because Travion Henderson's ADP in redraft is making this hurt a lot for a lot of people. On the bad side of the running back position, DeAndre Swift gets the Saints after his huge game last week. The Saints are 7th in AFPA. The Panthers duo, since we now know it will be a duo, gets the Jets, who are 8th. These aren't, lockdown running back defenses, but they're top 10. Travis Etienne gets the Rams, who are 4th in AFPA, and Travis Etienne's kind of been a bit of a mixed bag lately. Tony Pollard gets the Patriots, who are 5th, and Ty J. Spears is getting involved. That feels like a major void, but I'll get your thoughts. And then Zonovan Knight gets the Packers. Theoretically, also with Michael Carter, Amari DiMarcado should be out. These names that we're naming are crazy work. Of this whole list, you don't have to even hit everyone if you don't want to, but the notable stuff there, benches that wouldn't normally be, or starts that you'd still be confident in.
Yeah, I'm not playing Zonovan Knight. I'm not playing Tony Pollard. I said before, I don't really want to play either Carolina running back. And like if you picked up Kamani Vidal, I would play him over all those guys that I just mentioned.
Agree.
So that I feel like that's pretty easy. ETN feels like a guy that I just don't really want to start this week. You might not have a better option. But like if you had Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, I would start Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt over Travis Etienne. I would be tempted to start DeAndre Swift over Etienne. I don't love the Swift start either, but I think he's just fine. He's going to volume his way, and especially if the Bears do have more of a positive game script for most of this game, Swift could find his way into a double-digit PPR fantasy performance as like our top 20 running back, even if he doesn't score. So I think Swift will be fine. I think ETN will be okay too, but I just don't love it because, like you said, he's kind of a mixed bag, and he's had some kind of dud performances. And the Rams are a really good defense, especially against running backs. And he kind of splits a little bit with Bashal Tutin too. Like I've seen Tutin come in for red zone snaps a little bit more than I care to if I was a Travis Etienne manager. So it's just you probably don't have a better option, so you probably have to play ETN. But if you somehow do have a better option, I'd do it.
Yeah. If you're looking for expectations for Travis Etienne in a tough running back matchup, he's kind of had that the last 2 weeks. 12 carries in both games against the Chiefs and Seahawks, 49 yards, 27 yards on the ground. And he did get some targets in both those games, but didn't actually do all that much as a receiver either. No touchdowns in either game. So if you're remembering Travis Etienne's first month and starting based off of that, you're in a bad spot because he's not been that over these last couple of weeks in tougher matchups. And this one feels pretty similar. So if you have other options, I would try to find them. On the wide receiver front, the good side, the Chargers group gets the Colts, who are 31st in AFPA. They are quite good as a team this year. That's technically the best in the AFC. but they are almost dead last against wide receivers in AFPA. Jameson Williams gets the Bucks, who are 26th. Obviously, he's a fringe start that you hope has that big play. Maybe this is one of those chances. And then the Bucks wide receiver group, which we've talked about in pretty heavy detail, so we don't have to hit it much again. But just a reminder that the Lions are 30th in AFPA. So if you are going to try to stream one of those guys, it is a good matchup to do it. But Chargers group and Jameson, who are you willing to start? Is it everybody from that batch?
Yeah, is Quentin Johnston playing? Do we know?
He has been questionable
He
from what I've
practiced, right?
seen. I don't think we know yet.
So
He
that
practiced
would
in full on Thursday.
yes, that's what I thought I saw. I thought I saw a limited on Wednesday, and then I thought I saw the
Yep,
practice yesterday.
both correct.
So I'd imagine Quentin Johnston's playing, which lowers my confidence for both Keenan Allen and Lad McConkey. But I do think that they're all three playable, especially with all the injuries this week. Like you might be like, hey, I gotta play Lad McConkey because my alternative is Tez Johnson right now, and I'd be like, okay, yeah, play Lad McConkey. So I'm fine with all of them, but I have lowered expectations for Lad and Keenan, especially Lad based on what he's done the past 2 weeks with without Quentin Johnston last week. Jameson Williams, I think, is a fine play this week. I think that Buccaneers Lions game is going to be really, really fun. I was trying to find, like, we were saying, oh, if you could find a better option than Travis Etienne, who would it be? And I was looking up at the running back rankings, and like I would play David Montgomery over Travis Etienne this week because I think that game is going to be really, really fun, and I think Monty has a very high probability of scoring a touchdown. And I think Jameson Williams is kind of in that same boat. Same with Sam Laporta. Obviously, you're playing Amon Ra, so I think that game's going to be really, really, really fun. So I'm good with playing JMO and all the Chargers guys, and then we talked about the Tampa Bay wide receivers. If Mike Evans plays, it should be a good game.
Worth noting, if you are checking in on John's rankings on the site, Quentin Johnston's not in there yet, so McConkey is quite high at 10, and then Keenan Allen's at 22. You would figure both those guys would drop several spots if Quentin Johnston is available, and Johnston has been similarly ranked or just ahead of McConkey, I think, most weeks for John. So they'd probably all still be in wide receiver 2 to 3 range, I would imagine, which makes them startable. On the bad side, the Eagles, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith get the Minnesota Vikings, who have been disgusting against the passing game in general. They are so elite. This defense is monster. And obviously, the Eagles have not been super consistent in the passing game. So I'm curious how confident you are starting either of these guys, which is crazy to say, given how obviously highly drafted they were, especially A.J. Brown, and the fact that he's gotten a little better these last couple weeks. Elsewhere, the Colts wide receivers get the Chargers, who were third in AFPA. That group is a little confusing week to week, obviously, and they're also quite banged up. And then the Giants wide receivers we talked about against Denver. You can put out Wan'Dale Robinson maybe, but the rest don't feel good. What are your takes on the Eagles and Colts, though?
Yeah, I was looking up. John has A.J. Brown at wide receiver 24, and he's got Devontae Smith at 29.
Yeah.
So it's not great. JMO's right in there too, and I was actually like, I was like, would I play Jameson Williams over A.J. Brown? I'd play Jameson Williams over Devontae. Would I play him over A.J. Brown? Maybe if you were in a situation of like, hey, I just got Jamar chased last night, and I needed like massive upside, I would probably chase the Jameson Williams like 70-yard touchdown, or more, or like a really, really good Jameson Williams day than a really good A.J. Brown day. I think, again, you might not have better options, so you probably need to play A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. But if you had better options like a Jameson Williams, if you needed the upside, possibly like a Rashee Rice, who's coming in right now, a Tedero McMillan, a Cortland Sutton, a Jalen Waddle, I'd play all those guys over, insert Eagles wide receiver here. Indy wide receivers, I would play Michael Pittman because it doesn't sound like Josh Downs is playing. So I think Pittman is a fine start from volume. And that if that game is especially competitive, that's been one of the issues with the Colts, is that their games haven't been competitive. I think it was Kyle Borgognoni from the Fantasy Footballers I could be wrong, but I saw this tweet earlier today where Tyler Warren ranks like top 3 in every receiving category among all players in the NFL in first half production, and then
Wow.
ranks like outside the top 40 in second half production, because the Colts just don't need to play in the second half, and they can just hand the ball over to Jonathan Taylor and he just ends the game. So I'm wondering if this game is a little bit more competitive, we see more production from Michael Pittman and Tyler Warren, even against a bad matchup, a good defense. They could still get it done through strict volume.
Worth noting, Ashton Doolin also is not practicing. He sees a lot of wide receiver snaps, so there's maybe some Alec Pierce action
Alec
there as
Pierce
well.
week.
Yeah. Also, I'm gonna throw this out there. A bit of a hot take before we get to the tight ends and then close the show with the Q&A. I think the Colts are kind of fake. If you look at their schedule, they have played the Dolphins, who they smashed. They played the Broncos and barely won on a game-ending play, 29-28. Barely. And the Broncos weren't playing all that well, especially on offense. Then they beat the Titans. Then they lost to the Rams, who's the only actually great team they've played. Then they beat the Raiders. Then they beat the Cardinals. I think this is the worst schedule in football to start the year, or best, depending on how you look at it. Now they get the Chargers. That feels like a decently real test. And then they get the Titans, who are bad, and the Steelers, who are maybe not great, then the Falcons, who are kind of iffy. It's then the end of the year has some tough matchups. But I'm not convinced that they're actually this good. I would not be surprised to see them lose quite a few games over the stretch. Just throwing that out there. We will see. Let's close it out with tight ends. On the good side, Dallas Goedert, in that game we just talked about where the Eagles wide receivers are in big, big trouble against the number 1 team in AFPA against wide receivers and the Vikings. Those Vikings are 24th in AFPA against tight ends. And this is kind of a reverse of what we talked about somewhere earlier, where you figure that's probably because the receivers are getting locked up so much that the tight ends are forced to produce. And Dallas Goedert has been quite good. And then you've got the Cleveland tight ends, especially if it's just Harold Fannin. We kind of touched on that with David Njoku's injury against the Dolphins, who are 27th. And Mason Taylor, who you touched on. The Panthers are dead last in AFPA against tight ends. So if you're streaming him, especially with the injuries there and Garrett Wilson being out, that one looks pretty juicy. But any other thoughts that we haven't already shared on this group?
No, I think Dallas Goedert is a pretty good start just based on his usage, the matchup for AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. So Goedert has been one that feels like he just keeps producing every week, but we don't trust it. And I think we just need to kind of start trusting it. And especially in a matchup like this, I would play Dallas Goedert.
Okay, love it. I think he's a top 5 tight end this week. So he's a must start, IMO. On the bad side, TJ Hawkinson, who probably most people haven't been starting, or at least have not wanted to be starting. They may have been forced into it. He gets the Eagles, who are 3rd in AFPA. That's gross. And then Hunter Henry, who started the year really hot, but has not been great recently. That team, the Patriots, seem to just like pick a new guy every week to be their great guy, and it hasn't been Hunter Henry for a while. He gets the Titans, who are 7th in AFPA. I assume both these guys are sits for you, unless in desperate situations.
Yep, essentially. Like I'd play Dallas Goedert, I'd play Harold Fannin, I'd play Mason Taylor, I would play Michael Mayer over both of these guys. So,
all righty, that is all the matchups. We will go as quickly as possible through Q&A because good gracious, have we gone for a while here. But there are some good questions here. We cannot leave the listeners without answers. So we'll give the answers and we'll give a small bit of analysis, but maybe not the longest. Kai and Claudia says, non-PPR, who are you keeping rest of the season between Tucker Kraft, and George Kittle?
the answer is Kittle, but can you keep both?
Yes. The answer is, in my opinion, clearly Kittle. If you can trade Kraft for a great return, maybe do it. But not many people are trading for tight ends, I feel like, unless you can find a team that's desperate.
It would need to be some sort of a package deal where you take your running back in Kraft and get a better running back, or do that with the wide receiver position or something.
Big agree. I like that a lot. Jamie Parag says, I moved Jackson Dart up to my Dynasty QB9. A little Dynasty question here because we're the Dynasty guys. I feel like that's not high enough. Do you think he can hit that top 5 eventually?
I think so. I think that it's going to be a little bit more difficult, I think, for Dart to hit top 5 in the next year-ish, maybe just because of all the great quarterbacks that we have right now. And the Giants situation still kind of needs to be fixed. But I think the fact that you have him top 10, I think that he's going to be consensus top 10 by the end of the year, especially once we get into the offseason. We're like, oh, he gets Malik Neighbors back. The
Yep.
Giants just drafted this day 2 wide receiver. So it's going to be, Neighbors and that guy and Wandale and Theo Johnson and Cam Scattaboo. And, they drafted a tackle or something like that. My camera just turned off. Apparently the
Internal
temperature's too
temp
high.
high. Allow it to cool.
Oh, no. We're gone too long, Okada. But I think top 5 is high expectations for Jackson Dart and Dynasty, but top 10 is definitely well within range of outcomes. I think right now might be a tad high, but in the next few weeks, by the end of the year especially, I think that's going to be consensus.
Yeah, I agree. I like this a lot. His rushing upside is very impressive so far to start his career, and I think his pass game should get better, much better, as he continues to learn the NFL, grow as an NFL quarterback, and get pass catchers. Because right now he's got diddly bupkis. He's got Wandale Robinson, and he doesn't even have Darius Slayton because he's injured right now. So when Malik Neighbors comes back, especially, and then if they add some other guys, I think he can easily crack top 8, 6, maybe eventually 5. VBZ2X says, are you dropping Zach Charbonnet or Ty J. Spears if needed full PPR?
Yes, I would. Spears for sure. And then, if you need to drop Sharp for somebody better, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, I would agree massively here. Obviously, depends on who you're picking up, but these guys are both just attrition backs, more or less, that you're never going to start unless something happens in front of them. Skeeter with a super chat says, should I trade Saquon and Tet for Jahmyr Gibbs?
I'm trying to turn a fan on, see if my camera turns back on.
We have some color bars.
Wait.
Wait. Hey!
Hey! Can you hear the fan? It's right here next to my...
I cannot.
Okay, cool. Maybe the fan will lower. I don't think it's hot, but my camera's hot. Anyway, should I trade Saquon and Tet for Jahmyr Gibbs? This is a no for me. Because I was so scared to say it. And now it's going to be like, you didn't actually think this back then, but I was so scared to say it that I thought Jahmyr Gibbs was a little overrated in his redraft ADP. Ooh. Slightly, just because everybody was like, oh, he's RB1, RB2, RB3. And I'm like, dude, he doesn't have a ceiling with David Montgomery because Monty takes enough touches and then touchdowns to where Gibbs is fine and a great start every week, but he's not like Jonathan Taylor or, he wishes he could have Rico Dowdle's volume over the past couple of weeks. So I think there's not much of a difference between Saquon and Gibbs, even though Saquon's underperforming, to where to also add Tedero and McMillan to Saquon's side, that's just way too much for me.
Yeah. Also, Jahmyr Gibbs has not really been getting much in the receiving game. He had that weird week to start the year where he had 10 catches for 31 yards, which is obviously whack. But then since then, one game with 5 catches and then 2 or fewer in 3 straight. He did score a touchdown 2 weeks ago through the air. But if he's not getting 3, 4, 5 catches and 30, 40 yards on the ground, it makes it hard for him to be that elite ceiling because of what you talked about with Montgomery. Incidentally, though, I'll just throw this out there. If you can get one of the true elite RB1s, Bijan Robinson or Jonathan Taylor or maybe Christian McCaffrey with this move, I would do that because I do not believe Saquon Barkley is going to get better this year. It's something I said all offseason, that this always happens after someone has a year like he did last year. You regress majorly. You regress in volume often. You regress in health. You regress in efficiency. And he's done all of that. Well, he's still healthy, but we'll see how long that lasts. If you can make this move to get Robinson, Taylor, or CMC, to me, I would do that.
I would as well.
Okay, big. Third Eye Quadruple 07 says, PPR this week, should I drop Ridley for any of Whittington, Atwell, Dobbs, Wandale, Mason Taylor, Fannin, Tez Johnson, Monongai, Spears, Stevenson, Bam Knight, Tucker, that's Trey Tucker, or Kayshawn Boutte? So this is basically a do you like any of these guys rest of season or as a streaming player over Calvin Ridley?
I would do it for Fannin.
Okay.
Because you get the upside for Fannin this week without David Njoku, but then if Njoku gets traded, and then you have that upside for the rest of the season,
True.
that's pretty massive. I don't mind adding Stevenson. It's fine. I don't mind adding Trey Tucker. I don't mind adding Wandale. I don't mind adding Mason Taylor, but I think Fannin kind of sticks out to me as a guy that could be more of a wide receiver PPR kind of production from the tight end position, especially if David Njoku ends up getting traded. So if you just wanted to see what happens over the next couple of weeks, while Calvin Ridley's not playing, maybe, I would pick up Harold Fannin, and then maybe you could reevaluate if we get past the deadline and Njoku's still on the team.
I think this one depends a lot on what Ridley is to you right now. If he is commonly starting in your flex, I think that makes a big difference as to who you're willing to drop him for and pick him up for. Whereas if he's your wide receiver 6 and is always on your bench, in that case, I'm going for upside, guys with upside. And in the case where you need someone to roll out, I like Fannin. I like Mason Taylor this week. I like Wan'Dale Robinson probably in a vacuum over Ridley, so I would do that either way. And then Stevenson's one where if you need him this week, that's the move I would make. If you don't need this player, I'd rather have someone with more upside. So there's a lot of answers that we gave you, but that's how it would work out. There's a lot of names in fairness. IP14-2. Full PPR. Should I trade Romeo Doubs, Darren Waller, and Bo Nix and Jordan Mason for Garrett Wilson and Zay Flowers? Don't need QB or RB. I assume you also don't need tight end because you're trading away Darren Waller.
Yeah, Waller's he's weird because it's like, is he legit or is he not legit?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yes, I think I would make this deal because Jordan Mason is going to get Aaron Jones back.
Yep.
In a couple of weeks or maybe next week. I can't remember when Aaron Jones went out, but his 4 weeks are coming up here or already have passed. I think Aaron Jones is coming back soon. Dobbs is a waiver wire player. Darren Waller is, and then Bo Nix is a streaming quarterback that is not an every week kind of a guy. So, and especially if you don't need quarterback, you can move over to buy low on Garrett Wilson and Zay Flowers while Garrett Wilson's injured and Zay Flowers has not been playing with Lamar and is currently on bye. I think this is a phenomenal deal.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost always the case if you are trading 4 middling pieces for 2 great ones, you're winning the trade. So This is one of those examples. I would definitely go this way. Dylan Sandbags says, should I trade CMC and Kenneth Walker for Saquon and JT?
I think you do.
I agree.
I think you just do this just for the Walker to Saquon upgrade.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. I think CMC and JT are more or less neck and neck at the very top. It's hard to pick which one will be better rest of the year, but Saquon is, even with Saquon not playing that great, he's still been better than Kenneth Walker with Seattle refusing to use their running back room correctly.
Yeah, I think you got to pick Saquon and JT. This is wow. I'm surprised somebody's even willing to do this.
I'd be curious if this is a thought that you want to offer or something someone offered you, because I'd be pretty surprised if someone took this. But if you can pull it off, I would do it. Modern Poppy says, do you think Jalen Coker's return will negatively impact Tedero McMillan? Context, traded away Tucker Kraft. I have Laporta and Kittle and Marvin Harrison Jr. for Tet and Vidal. Don't know how I feel about it.
I don't think Jalen Coker's return is going to negatively impact Tedero McMillan. I think McMillan was drafted to be and has so far been the alpha wide receiver for Bryce Young. I think if anything, Jalen Coker probably just takes all the kind of ancillary targets that we have seen from Hunter Renfrow and maybe cuts into Xavier Legette. And, that's essentially where Coker is getting his value. Like Tedero McMillan is head and shoulders better than every other wide receiver on that team. And he has shown that already through his target share. And I think will continue to show that even through the return of Jalen Coker. So I like this deal overall, because especially if you need a running back, Vidal is going to be the starter potentially for the next, we'll say 6 weeks, because it sounds like
Yeah.
Hampton's going to be out for quite some time.
Yep.
That you're moving from Marv to Tet, who feel very similar, but then you're trading away unnecessary tight end depth in Tucker Kraft and moving over to a running back that you might actually need, and one who might actually be pretty solid for the next month and a half to 2 months. I don't mind this deal overall, especially I think Tedero McMillan could have that second half rookie season surge that we see a lot of rookies have. I'm very, very confident in him for the remainder of the year.
Yeah. So that's always something to remember with these rookies is as a data point, obviously not every single time, but very consistently, they get better as the year goes on, sometimes much better. So it's very within the realm of possibility that Ted McMillan is suddenly like a top 15 wide receiver down the stretch because he has that big, big breakout. And I will say, I think it's more likely that Coker's return positively impacts Ted than negatively impacts him because obviously having some other guys there that can make this offense function a little bit and take some attention, I don't mind that at all. I would rather this offense get better than Tet theoretically lose a target or two. And like you said, he's a true number one. I don't even necessarily see that happening. I think it's more likely Coker takes from the tertiary or secondary guys there.
Right.
That is going to be it because there are a lot of other start-sit questions, but we are at a very extended time recording this podcast. If you have a start-sit question that we didn't answer, again, go to the website, check out the rankings, and try to use that as best as you can. Or there's also a Discord you can drop stuff in, or Twitter, or Blue Sky, where you can throw questions to us or John Paulson. I don't know how he'll get to them. He's very busy, obviously. But that'll be it for this show. Tons and tons of stuff. Thank you, Addison. Any last words or things to note, shout out, point out to the listeners?
No, we appreciate everybody for hanging out with us. I was looking up Aaron Jones is eligible to return after this week. So there is that. I was trying to look that up for the Jordan Mason thing. The bye week got thrown in there, so it ruined his 4-week absence. And then I saw Harry Brooks's question in here. I would drop Joe Mixon. I don't think he returns this season, and I would move Trey Benson to your IL and free up a roster spot. So
100%. Yeah. The Joe Mixon situation is super strange, and I don't think he's coming back.
Yep.
All right.
I would drop Joe Mixon, and that would do it. So thank you, everybody.
Agree. Thanks to you for joining this week. Thanks to everybody for hanging out and asking questions. We will sign off there. Good luck in week 7, and we will see you next time. Adios.